Let's pretend for a moment that I haven't watched Nerdslayer's video about Final Fantasy and don't know about the version 1.0. Let's also pretend that I'm not someone who excessively googles questions about the current game and has only heard that to quote, Final Fantasy XIV has one of the best stories and leveling experiences. Good stories and leveling experiences alone are more than enough to get an alcoholic like me excited. Finally, a game that doesn't revolve around endgame, a game where the journey is the focus and not just an obstacle to overcome before the game actually begins. As I've only played the free trial, I cannot review the whole game, nor should this video be taken as such. These are my thoughts as a beginner intended for you, and mostly for me as a reminder, as in years time I will only remember that I tried Final Fantasy, but nothing more. Not addressing the visual side first feels wrong. While style-wise it's not my usual preference, it's still a gorgeous game in my opinion, largely thanks to the lighting engine. The lighting lets the sunset base zones with shadows, gives warm glow to the windows at night and highlights the glowing spires near Limsa Lominsa. These features hide in plain sight at daytime, but show their true beauty only to travelers in the deep night. It almost makes me forget how much I hate nighttime. Another thing to address in the visual of the game are mounts. Mounts are a large part of what guides my first impression of any MMO. I like to collect them all and then continue to only use my favorite one. I looked into the number of available mounts and counted that there are 150 currently obtainable, and 21 of them are able to be bought with cash. For someone who hates in-game shops, having to buy a game enhancement like this is a sore thorn on my side. I will ignore it for now and praise how they look regardless. They aren't your generic ones, like armored horses or tigers. Instead, mounts are cars, beds, beholders, gorillas, or whatever this is. I've found them to be really quite creative. Meeting another player with mount in the level 1 to 35 zones was a rare but exciting occurrence, as mounts are not allowed in capital cities. If the mounts and the glowing spires weren't enough eye candy, then gear is. For so long, I've been watching armor that is glued, or worse painted to the model. Final Fantasy is done it the way I dreamed 15 years ago. Layers upon layers of clothing are stacked to the model so well that it has made its own subplay style where players just take in-game photo shoots. Beautiful scenery and models come with a hefty price of long loading times, which may have something to do with the fact that the game is also available on consoles. Nothing takes away immersion for me more than hitting a loading screen between every zone or having an invisible wall in the middle of the zone because it's not meant for you to take shortcut here, even though it clearly looks like you can. On top of that, for every open zone like Gentle Shroud, there's 3 claustrophobic hallway zones like East Shroud. I understand that it decreased load weight of each zone, and they made map feel bigger as some zones aren't next to each other in lore. You're just traveling through these unnamed zones in the loading screen that can be added as a playable zones later. Clever work on paper, but I choose lesser graphics and smaller lore words in any day if it means I can walk from one end of the continent to the other without any loading screens. On my next point, I will come up ignorant, and it's perfect time to mention that I have never played any Final Fantasy game, nor have I any idea of this universe. I haven't mentioned the playable races yet. I try not to compare Final Fantasy with other games, but I will break my rule for one time here. In World of Warcraft there are 2 factions, Horde and Alliance. For a long time the Alliance was made fun for only having basically 2 races. There was humans. There were dwarves who were short humans with beards. There were gnomes who were even shorter humans. There were night elves that were humans with pointy ears, and then there were Draenei. While choosing my chapter, apart from few exceptions, I couldn't not feel a comparison begin to bubble in my mind. From a distance, how do you judge from one silhouette to another who's approaching you? There's no outdoor PvP or racial, so it won't really matter, but if everyone melts together, what's the point of choosing? Instead of giving tails and ears to humans that could be achieved with cosmetic gear, give me something like this. Or that to play as. Being able to only have one chapter and still have all the classes is by far the biggest attraction for me. I've never done the reputations, dailies or achievements in MMOs since I have never had just one main. I have 4 to 8 chapters that I alternate, and doing reputation grind with one means I would need to do the same with all of my chapters. With Final Fantasy I could play this content too and open some kind of endgame loop instead of always leveling. For certain reasons from the past, classes are called different classes until level 30, when they get the job stone and are from then on called jobs. Marauder becomes warrior, rogue becomes ninja, and so on. For clarity's sake, I will call them by their class names since I spend most of my time without job stone. I had a pool of 10 classes to choose from and I spent 120 hours capping them alongside of the crafting skills. Warrior is usually my way to go in RPGs. I'm not a fan of spells or rogue stealthy combo style, so me smash style fits me well. Oh, what is this? Marauder has a combo system. Oh, well, that is definitely a peculiar way to design one. Luckily it's only one of the 10 classes, so there's still plenty of styles to go. Honestly, I don't know what I expected when choosing Rogue as my next class. In short, combo system rewards you from pressing 3 buttons in order and punishes if you fail to do so. The flashy effects around skills make the Simon Say game easier, but I do prefer generating points with some spells and spending them to other more powerful ones. How stealth is treated in game breaks or makes the rogue class. In Final Fantasy, mob aggro range is inconsistent but short, so you won't feel like having upper hand against other classes when moving past mobs when they can walk next to you without pulling them either. To devalue stealth even more, the crafting system allows miners, herbalists and woodcutters to be invisible to mobs up to +4 their level. Where stealth really shines though is PvP, which I didn't touch. So, there's still a chance of Rogue being that annoying thorn on your side when you are left alone for a second by your teammates after all. As someone who isn't a fan of range classes, I was really surprised how much fun I had as an Arcanist. Using dots and spreading them gave efficient and fast way to kill multiple mobs at the same time, and what my dots didn't kill, my pet finished. Another fantastic class with circle cutting option, a little bit of proc style rotation. Being able to constantly sprint and leap away from melee range gave it unique feeling, not to mention the size and beauty of high level bows. Circle kiting as both Arcanist and Archer end up being my favorite playstyle. Unlike other games, Final Fantasy gives mobs really short range for melee, which means running circles without getting hit is easy. To combat against mass farming of mobs, the devs have made the leash really short, meaning just stepping a few steps away from mobs' original spawn points makes it reset. I could usually pull 2 to 4 mobs without de-aggroing anything, but any more would make the first mob return to safety. Lancer is combo-based melee class. Next. My first healer. Nothing too out of ordinary here. You got your big heal, a small heal, and some damaging spells to harm enemies. Simple but solid. Arcanist splits to Scholars and Summoners at level 30, so I don't have more than 2 dungeons under my belt as one, but wanted to give some feedback. A more interesting healer than Conjurer, you have minions like the Arcanist do, but instead of damaging enemies they heal party members. You also don't just heal party members, but also place a shield on them that will mitigate incoming damage, giving you more time to do some damage yourself while the shields stick off. It's another combo-based melee class, but in addition to the 3-button rule, each skill does more damage if you position yourself right. You must run from the side to the back of the mob depending the ability. What I do like is that they have charge and movement speed buff, but the damage loss you get since you can't position yourself right when soloing is not worth it. This would change if you had tank friend to level with you. These are more standard idea of a mage. Stacking fire spells give you a damage buff, but it also increases mana cost of each spell. You balance this with frost spells that replace the damage buff with increased mana regen. So keep switching between these two elements with some lightning mixed into it. My fanatic Shieldslam brain wanted this to be the class for me. I want to believe it was something different. I dreamed about righteously cleansing lands of evil with my barn-door-sized shield and the light guiding my way. But what I got was pretty much the same as warrior, but with shield instead of two-hander. I know, it's get better after level 50. I have no doubt of that, and I understand that every class will feel the same for the first steps, but my jobs are already at 70% of the ARR level cap. It is a shame that the trial cap hits just where you earn your jobstone and when most likely classes will start to move to their own individual ways. This complaint is mainly targeted against the melee classes, since ranged ones did have their own thing going on from quite early on, while melee ones didn't feel much different from one another. We went through the jobs, but I will squeeze my thoughts about the long global here, and yes, it's hard to get accustomed to it. But if the game is built around the idea of one action per 2.5 seconds, that's fine. The thing that puts me off is the spells you have to weave between them. While playing any MMO, eventually you get in the rhythm of the global cooldown without paying attention to it. But adding another subrotation to the mix that you need to do between them just messes up my internal metrodome. Final Fantasy is not the first MMO I have tried that has this subrotation style of gameplay, and none of them have felt too comfortable to me. I did enjoy having stuns, interrupts and cooldowns of global though. Note: while there is minimal weaving at level 35, I mainly meant endgame rotations. Completing main story is mandatory to unlock the expansions, dungeons and most likely endgame as well, and there is a lot of air. Most of the quests feel like they are there just to make sure player can level up by following them. But with a game that has multiple sources of XP, leveling through one quest chain shouldn't even be a thing. I made it to the Wrath of the Titan and wasn't pulled into the story. Most of the quests include talking to various NPCs that spoke a lot but said little, traveling from one zone to another to meet these said NPCs and sometimes killing a mob or two. Setting up characters and lore is important, but a lot of the main story quests could have been side quests if you wish to delve deeper into certain topics and characters. Leave the main story quest to be something that moves the story forward rather than reading about it. Make it one quest per level if needed. Make me want to gather the XP to unlock the next main story quest rather than punish me for getting experience from other sources. Currently Final Fantasy reminds me more of visual novel than MMORPG. The good news is that while writing this I have heard that soon there will be a patch that will get rid of some of the fluff from ARR main story, which should make it more enjoyable to follow, and what I've heard, questing will also get better after level 50. Panels, meters, counters, pop-ups, alerts, add-ons, mods, I'm a fan of all of them, be that multiplayer or single player. Given the option, the UI is unrecognizable after a couple of days in my hands. While Final Fantasy has its fair share of nice things going on in its toolkit, it was no surprise that after the first evening I googled Final Fantasy XIV add-ons, and there was none. Well, there was that one which shall not be named, but I will talk about that later. So, I was immersed with the game's own UI tools, and I did manage to make something that felt like home. The acro list is my favorite new thing, and it's going to be odd to play other games without it. From the list you can see how many enemies you are in combat with, and toggle target between these mobs without fear of pulling extra ones. See if you have aggro from them, and each mob has letters assigned to them, so it's easy to call kill order even if the mobs are identically named. One issue is that when your party is in combat with something, it won't always update in your list. What I never learned to like was the unit frames. I'm wired to the wheel as such. My health here, my resources here, enemy has the same thing here, an enemy portrait here so I can easily see who I'm targeting, and for symmetry's sake my portrait here. But Final Fantasy wants to do it differently. Even after almost 5 days played, I was constantly looking for what I thought to be enemy health bar and wondering why it's not dead. just to realize I'm out of mana. This is a specific and odd complaint, but don't worry, there will be more of them later. Another thing I missed aside from proper unit frames was the add-on I mentioned earlier, that being the damage meter, one that records your and rest of the party members' stats when it comes to damage and healing numbers. The way I understood it, the add-on is on use but don't talk about it grounds. No one can detect if you're using it if you don't mention about it, but if you are caught using it you may be banned. I'm not a fan of these grey area rules, so I left it alone. Why would I want to have it then? Well, I had 2 tanks, 2 healers and 6 DPS in similar gear and level. Naturally want to know which one did most damage, mitigate most blows and heal it most efficiently. As a raid of the past, it made sense that each raider would need a tool like this. And I don't mean to see who's on top of the DPS list, but to see why the boss isn't dying, who is the bottom of the meter and how the rotation can be improved, why tanks die mid-fight, why the healers before the last phase. All this is important information to look into when guild hits brick wall at the boss fight. We aren't allowed to use it, because feared to cause elitism in big up groups. While I can see where this argument is coming from, I firmly believe that if you are kicked from your 10th group of the night, maybe it's you and not the toxic player base. Maybe it's time to take that unsolicited advice and admit that playing the game how you want is only viable when you solo. Being that ranged warrior whose main stat is int is fine and maybe fun challenge when you play alone or with a group that is cool about it prior entering the group content. But most of the time when it's group effort, everyone should at least try to pull their own weight. Of course, I was only able to do low-level dungeons, and maybe no one would even notice or care if I auto-attacked mobs meters on or not. But when it's about mid to hard content, you are guilty of dragging the group behind you just as much as they are ruining your fun by telling how to play optimally. I've because of being annoyed about normal things that others won't give 2 thoughts about. I've been writing them up along with my other notes. So here's an odd list of things I liked and didn't like. Final Fantasy's best community saved by Final Fantasy community. But I wasn't part of that. It's sad that we must make rules around gold sellers, but as long as there's free trials, there's bot spamming. Trials can't whisper, yell, or join clans. A few times I tried to start conversation with /say, didn't get response. I also won't count hey, and thanks for the party macros in otherwise silent dungeons as social encounters. Final Fantasy had unfair uphill fight from the very beginning. I did have no prior knowledge about the series, and I'm not a fan of the weep culture to the point that it took me a few years and dozen tries before I installed and played it. Trial didn't do a good job convincing me to continue with the monthly fee. None of the classes felt exciting, and I wasn't keen enough to any of the races to see them in high level gear. You can't communicate with others, so the social aspect won't draw you in either, and story didn't have enough ramp time to make me interested to see what happens next. I don't know what kind of game lies behind level 50. But what I've heard to the point of becoming a funny joke to me is, it gets better after 50.